Thank you. All right, well, good morning, everybody. My name is Amy Manzelli, and this is the part of the class where I say you are at Navigating the Transition, Balancing Infrastructure Interests and Environmental Stewardship. And if that's not where you're meant to be, you should stay, because it's going to be awesome. I work as an environmental and land use and energy attorney all around New Hampshire and Maine, and I am thrilled to be talking about this with you today and with this really great panel. As I was reflecting on my introduction, which is super short, don't worry, it dawned on me that this audience would especially appreciate the following. You know it's November, right, as of today? How's everybody enjoying that 70-degree weather in November, right? Totally normal, nothing wrong here. So I know all of us understand the existential threat that we face with climate change, and we are mostly, all of us here, because we want to change to renewables and decarbonize in part to meet that threat. So that's sort of my opening framing of why we're talking about what we're talking about today. And today our panel will explore the careful and sensitive balancing of these sometimes competing interests, the siting and construction, the modernizing the infrastructure, integrating community interests, all the while making sure our natural resources are protected. We'll talk about solutions from statutory, regulatory, and economic development perspectives. So I'm going to introduce the panel very briefly, and they can say a little bit more about themselves when it's their turn. I'm going to go in order that we're going to have the speakers start. So Mark is first. Mark Zankel is the Director of Community Solar at Revision Energy. And I always like to help, see the whole person. So after the panel, in addition to all the good substantive stuff, you might want to talk with Mark about the time when himself, his wife, and his 2 young kids were chased by a wild elephant in the shadow of the Himalayas. Next speaking, and also next to Mark, will be Jessica Wilkinson, who is the North America Renewable Energy Team Lead for the Nature Conservancy. And I really appreciate this because sarcasm is very big in my family. You might want to talk about Jessica's passion, not only for cross-stitching, but in particular, cross-stitching sarcastic slogans. Here to my left will be our third panelist, Deb Perry. Deb is the Clean Energy Program Director at International City County Management Association. And she's the most active of all. In her spare time, you can talk to her about her passion for renovating houses. And then Sam Feigenbaum, here to the right of your right table, or to the left of your right table, is the Senior Associate for Development, Legal, and Government Affairs at Kearsarge Energy. Now, Sam has the distinction of having the most youthful factual tidbit. Sam has a daughter, a puppy, and a kitten, all under 16 months old. And I do just want to give a shout out of thanks for someone who's not on the panel but did most of the behind the scenes work here, and that's Chris Skoglund, the Director of Energy Transition at Clean Energy New Hampshire. So if you see him today, just give him a thanks. All right, instructions for the audience. As we're going along, we welcome questions. It's always better to have it be interactive so that you can extract from this panel the thoughts and concepts and information that is of most interest to you. So please just raise your hand, I'll call on you, and we want to get those questions in. We are also, what's my time here, going to try to have the panelists' opening remarks be completely done by 11:45, so we have a dedicated question and answer time. But there's no need to hold your questions. I want you to just launch as they are occurring to you. Okay, without further ado, Mark.
All right. Good morning, everybody. If you can't hear me, just let me know. But I'll try to make sure I'm talking into the mic. I'm Mark Zankel. I'm the Director of Community Solar for Revision Energy. to start just like real quickly about Revision. Revision is a mission-driven, 100% employee-owned local solar company. We've got offices and operations in Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts. And our roots are in solar. And today we're really at the core construction company that helps communities, families, businesses, and nonprofits enjoy the financial and environmental benefits of solar. Been around for a while, 21 years. And in that time, we've installed over 15,000 clean energy projects, saved our customers a whole lot of money, kept a lot of carbon dioxide from being emitted. And we're a certified B Corporation, B Corps like Patagonia, Ben & Jerry's, here in New Hampshire, Badger. And it basically means that we really work hard to balance people, planet, and profit in all of our work every day. So before joining Revision, I spent 27 years at the Nature Conservancy, including with my friend Jessica here. And when I was thinking about this session, I was struck by how strong the overlap was in coming at this question of what do we want and what should we try to achieve from a Nature Conservancy perspective and from a Revision energy perspective. So I think what we want and should work to achieve is local renewable energy that's sufficient to meet our current and our future energy needs and our climate goals. I think we want a resilient and a connected landscape that supports thriving biodiversity. We want and we need productive farm and forest land and thriving farm and forest businesses that meet our needs for local food and wood. And we should be respecting landowner and community goals, interests, and knowledge. So, solar in New Hampshire, you saw a couple slides earlier. I don't like every chart like Sam, but I like a couple of them. So solar is gaining momentum here in New Hampshire, and you can see on this that annual installations have been rising steadily for the past few years. But when you look at this graphic, it shows that the percent of solar in the electricity supply across the New England states, to say that we're lagging in New Hampshire is kind of an understatement. We can do so much better here, and we need to do so much better. So why is New Hampshire so far behind our neighbors? There is a whole bunch of reasons, the most important of which I've outlined on this slide, and I'm not going to talk through them, but if you want to unpack them, I'm sure that Sam, Debra, all of us can explore these further with you. I'll simply note that a lot of these can be addressed through better policy. So if you care about the clean energy transition in New Hampshire, please make your voice heard, vote, got that election thing coming up, and talk to your legislators, because there's going to be a lot going on in the legislature in this next session around clean energy that will support or curtail our renewable energy transition dreams.
Mark, I'm going to interrupt with a question. Municipal, state, or federal policy? In your statement there that policy needs to change for these things to change.
So I think right now we have pretty strong federal policy. We can talk more about that, but I would say federal policy has probably never been as good as it is now. We have pretty poor state policy framework in New Hampshire for renewable energy development. We don't have good net metering compensation for renewable energy. We do not have an open market for all energy users to fully participate in solar energy projects. And we have challenges with interconnection, which Sam can speak about. So state policy is where I would focus. But at the municipal level, municipalities can help or hinder with local ordinances related to solar, and we can talk more about that too.
Thank you.
So at Revision, we build a lot of rooftop solar, and we want nothing more than to see every roof and every parking lot support solar arrays. And there is not a viable pathway to getting off fossil fuels solely through rooftops and parking lots. I wish there was, but there isn't. One way to bring a lot of distributed and locally generated solar into the energy mix is through what we call community solar farms. A community solar farm is a large off-site array up to 5 megawatts in size that can power dozens to hundreds of electricity users. So Revision works with interested private and municipal landowners to evaluate their lands for the potential to host a community-scale solar farm. That's the work that my team does. We start with the landowner's goals, and then we evaluate the characteristics of the property. Is this land suitable for a community-scale solar project? Then we look at whether we think we can interconnect and permit a solar project on that property. And here's the thing. When you look at land features and grid infrastructure, most of New Hampshire's landscape is off the table for community solar. So how much land and what land are we willing to make available for local renewable energy? This is a question I think about a lot. I thought about it when I was at the Nature Conservancy. I think about it a lot at Revision. When we think about how to meet and balance all of those sustainability goals and interests, what are we willing to make available? So New Hampshire is 6 million acres. We've got a whole lot of forest, about 4.7 million acres, 81% of our state. We've got about 420,000 acres that are in active farms. So at the landscape level, there is quite a bit to work with here in New Hampshire. And so I want to take you on like a little thought exercise. So in 2022, New Hampshire consumed almost 11 million megawatt hours of electricity. And as of 2022, New Hampshire gets got about 14% of its electricity from renewables, 40% from fossil fuels, primarily natural gas, and the balance from nuclear. If we wanted to replace all of New Hampshire's remaining fossil fuel electricity sources, the total additional renewables to meet the 2022 demand would be about 3,400 megawatts of new capacity. Sounds like a lot. And let's say we wanted half of that to come from solar, ground mount solar. Because some of it's going to come from wind, other sources. A lot of it's going to come from rooftop solar. But let's say we wanted half to come from ground mount. It takes about 5 acres of land for a megawatt of electricity. We want 1,700, what was that number? We want 1,700 megawatts of electricity. That gets you to about 8,500 acres of land in New Hampshire to get rid of half of our remaining need for fossil fuels. Or let's say double it, 17,000 acres, take care of the whole business with ground mount solar. That 8,500 acres represents about 0.1% of New Hampshire's land area, maybe 2% of our active farmland, less than 0.2% of New Hampshire's forest land. And so, I find myself asking folks, are we willing to utilize 0.1% of our state to transition away from the fossil fuels that are destroying the planet? I spent most of my career protecting land and water, and I'm really passionate about land and water, and that question is pretty easy for me to answer. So I'll just end with this. Can we have it all, and what trade-offs are we willing to make? There are a lot of considerations to balance. Locating projects that support landowner goals, are consistent with state natural resource goals, are not objectionable to an individual or a group, and are financially viable. This can feel like a very narrow strike zone if you're a solar developer. And the cumulative impact of grid challenges and state and local policy can further narrow the strike zone. And so, if we want a renewable energy transition, we want local energy, there is a risk of death by 1,000 cuts. And, in my mind, there's no free lunch when it comes to energy. Ultimately, achieving net zero carbon dioxide emissions by 2050 is going to require siting an unprecedented number of renewable energy facilities in a very short amount of time. And we should minimize the impacts and maximize the benefits of energy development. And I'd argue across the New Hampshire landscape, we can get the balance right. We have plenty of space. We can have it all at the statewide level. But we can't necessarily have it all on every acre on every property because the opportunities for where you can actually locate and build renewables is not evenly distributed across our state. So there'll be some hard choices and some trade-offs on some acres and some properties. And in thoughtfully addressing these choices, we can meet our goals for renewable energy, natural resource conservation, food and fiber, and get that balance right. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Jessica.
Jessica, let me just ask, if there are any questions, go ahead. Comment on that, and then I'd invite Sam too as well. So, I mean, all of the above in a sense. We do work with private and municipal landowners. What's great about municipalities, right? Municipalities in New Hampshire have lands that are they're not high conservation value lands. They may be previously disturbed or impacted, like capped landfills. And they're great places to think about solar redevelopment. It's an opportunity to provide revenue to municipality, in some cases to offset municipal energy use. So that community benefit is really clear. The community benefit connection is really clear when you're talking about municipal lands. The challenge, of course, is, as you said, slow, cumbersome decision-making processes, often multi-step decision-making processes, whether it's select boards or town councils and then town meetings. So not always easy. So you have to really have a long-term view, which I think many good solar developers do. But we love working with municipalities, and it takes a while, and you can feel like you have a great project, and then have a group of active people who come and kill it at town meeting. So private landowners are wonderful because we see, like, we work with a lot of farmers, and what many of them have said to us is, if I can put solar on this less productive part of my property, it's going to allow, and have that predictable, steady income, it's going to allow me to continue to farm and have a farm business on the rest of my property. And so private landowners have a different set of incentives, easier decision-making process. So I think it's both, and there's some different sort of pros and constraints around each. Sam, before you get started, I just want to welcome folks in the back to come on up. There are loads of chairs in the front. Private land than public land. That's okay.
Yeah, I can speak to that. Our business development team spends a lot of time both engaging in conversations with public entities and private landowners. There's more private land than there is public land. So on a relative basis, we probably spend more time in conversation with private landowners than with public entities. But for the reasons that Mark set out, we love doing public projects. They're often easier to permit because you're on brownfield land as opposed to farmland or forested land. And from a political perspective, though you might have trouble at town meeting, if you've gone through an RFP with the town, you usually have the town administration behind you. And so that can make things easier. One of the difficulties in New Hampshire is the town meeting component, which comes in because you need a town meeting vote if you're going to lease land for longer than 5 years usually. Mm-hmm. You don't have that component in other jurisdictions, so it can be a bit of a simpler process once you've gone through the RFP and gotten the award from the municipality. So you can run into some turbulence with town meeting. Maybe you fail 10% of the time, 15% of the time at town meeting. You usually don't. but you do sometimes.
Thank you, too. We'll take one more question over here, and then we'll move on to Jessica.
On your chart showing how solar has grown, the penultimate bar, commercial, was considerable, and the last one is really quite small. What's holding commercial back? Why is that not working for commercial adoption?
I think the two biggest things that are holding back solar in New Hampshire across the board and are low energy compensation for renewable energy here. Our energy compensation for solar in New Hampshire is so much less than any of our neighboring states because we don't reflect the true value of solar to the grid and to all energy users in New Hampshire in the way that energy is compensated in New Hampshire, particularly for the larger scale kinds of projects we're talking about today, those that are over 100 kilowatts in size. And so that makes the return on investment longer and the simple payback period longer, which for commercial businesses is really important. If they're weighing, am I going to invest in solar with a 7-year return or something else I could put my money towards that might have a 5-year or a 3-year return, that makes it harder to compete. So energy compensation is, energy value compensation is a really big deal. The other one I'll just say is there are economies of scale with solar. So we think about everything in dollars per watt. And when you go up closer to 5 megawatts in the scale of your project, you can build at a lower dollar per watt cost. You can pass those savings on to your energy, your commercial or other energy users. And right now, New Hampshire has this artificial cap on who can participate in a community solar array above 1 megawatt. And commercial entities can't right now. Only municipalities and schools can do so. And so that's an artificial constraint that prevents New Hampshire businesses from being able to participate in and secure lower cost energy from those larger arrays where you can get the economies of scale. Hopefully we'll fix that.
Couple comments. Just real quick, for those of you who are not aware, even the municipalities and schools being able to participate up to 5 megawatts is a new improvement in the policy in New Hampshire. So there is movement. It just might not be fast enough or plain old enough. Sam, just real quick, and then we'll move on to Jessica.
Sounds good. One thing I'd add with commercial industrial projects is there's often a financing challenge. If the business doesn't have the capital to own the system themselves, they'd want to enter into a lease with a solar owner-operator and finance the project through a long-term PPA. But there's often credit risk there on the PPA. If it's a small business, you don't know if they're going to be around in 20, 30 years, which is the length you need for the PPA. Whereas if you're off-taker as a town, it's a sure bet the town's going to be around in 20, 30 years.
Sorry, we're just going to move on to Jessica for now, just so we don't run out of time and short some of the other later speakers. But we are trying to have that dedicated 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. Go ahead, Jessica.
Thanks, folks. So Jessica Wilkinson, I'm with the Nature Conservancy. I work with our North America region, so I support our chapters and divisions around the country, working on renewable energy. And you will find that we use similar language, I think, which reflects the fact that the Nature Conservancy has a certain way of talking about things. And Mark was at the Nature Conservancy for 26 years before moving to Envision. So the Nature Conservancy, global conservation organization, whose mission is to protect the lands and waters on which all life depends. And addressing the climate crisis is front and center for us as well. So we're really trying to address these two crises, the biodiversity crisis and the climate crisis, and renewable energy is kind of in the middle there, and a significant challenge. And this is something we really foresaw, I think, probably decades before a lot of other folks in the conservation and even in the renewable energy development community. Oh, right, yes. I'm looking at my computer, which is not advancing the slides. Not helpful. So the Nature Conservancy's renewable energy program at the global program, at the North America program, and in our chapters is focused on accelerating a clean, green, and equitable energy transition. So this is our vision for success. And whether it's looking at an individual project or a policy, this is the lens we try and bring. And another way that we kind of talk about this is the 3 Cs. So we want to see projects approved faster. We need to deploy a tremendous amount of renewable energy to meet our climate goals, and we need to do it quickly. But we also want to bring to that a lens of not just the climate, but also conservation and communities. And we talk about that as 3 Cs. So we look at policies and projects and programs through this 3C lens. And we also, I feel like very often in the kind of public discourse, renewable energy and conservation are discussed as kind of a zero-sum game. We can't have both. And we're a science-based organization. We really wanted to test this and see if that was indeed the case. And our way of doing that is a kind of approach that we call power of place. It started in California when that state adopted really aggressive renewable energy goals. And as a conservation organization with roots in land protection, we were really concerned. If we're going to continue to meet our climate goals and support them, does that mean we're going to have to sacrifice on the conservation side? So it was really our California chapter who first devised this approach of doing kind of decarbonization scenario modeling. We did it in California, we did it in the West, and then last year we put out a national study. So this is not forecasting, but it's working with sophisticated energy models where you ask the model essentially, get us to net zero by 2050, and the model kind of selects least cost pathways and then spits out, okay, well, this is how much resources you're gonna need, wind, solar, other technologies. What we ask the model to do is go do that, and then model, go do that, but take out of consideration parks and national wildlife refuges. Can we still get there? Yes. We asked the model to also look at whether we could do that, taking out those lands, plus things that are endangered species habitats and other things. And then we asked it to also go try and meet net zero by 2050 economy-wide, while taking out also not regulated things, but things that are important for supporting long-term viability of conservation values. So resilient and connected lands are going to be important for maintaining biodiversity in the face of a changing climate. What we found with this is, at least with Power of Place, our finding there was that we can get to net zero by 2050 while avoiding most impacts to sensitive natural and working lands. And doing so comes at a cost premium, but it's a pretty low cost premium. That doesn't take into consideration, I think, when you're avoiding conflict, you're probably also avoiding cost overruns, project cancellations, so probably we like to think comes out even, not a lot of ways to demonstrate that. But I think an important thing to note here is that we found that we can do this while avoiding most impacts, but not all. So there will still be trade-offs, even if we do this really well, and we recognize that, but we can diminish those significantly. So what this model showed was that to get to net zero by 2050, we will need a land footprint, if we kind of continue along the trajectory we currently do, of an area the size of Texas. That's how much land we're going to need for wind and solar to meet our renewable energy goals. If we do it smart, get the right incentives in place, we can reduce that by half. So a significant amount. And that's a significant amount of reduction also in conflict. So that's obviously what we advocate for. We have done some work on state policy pathways and have some additional work underway. This is a very vigorous rate going on nationally right now. What policies can we put in place to accelerate renewable energy deployment? There's a lot of work that's been done on that. But the Nature Conservancy is trying to say, what policies can we put in place to accelerate renewable energy deployment and do it in this 3C way? So what are the policies that can get us there and minimize impacts to nature and maximize benefits to communities? So this is not anything that we've published yet, but we hope to soon. These are kind of broad areas of policy that have been demonstrated to be successful and that are very actively being debated all over the country. the one in particular that I think has come up a lot and that I understand you've grappled with also in New Hampshire is around kind of what entity are you vesting the control in making the permitting decision? And yes, I do agree strongly that federal government has some role to play, but most of these decisions are made at a state or local level, and most of them are made at a local level. And enabling conditions at the state level, I think, are really critical. And so kind of where that control rests can make a big difference. And you are seeing a lot of states essentially take away some local control. Sometimes it's like over 25 megawatts or some kind of threshold like that, and are trying to find ways to balance that by also mandating robust community engagement and like specific timelines and benefit sharing. But it is an active conversation going around the country, and we are seeing trends in that direction. California, Michigan, Illinois, New York, Massachusetts. So that's one kind of policy bucket. Another one is also kind of one-stop shop permitting. Very fractured kind of permitting that developers need to deal with. So we are seeing states kind of adopt policies to make it easier. That could mean one permit. You only need to get one permit that covers everything. It also could just mean that the state is setting up one place to go, and then that state office is kind of facilitating across different agencies to help you get your, if there's a species permit or a wetlands permit, which is an approach that New York took. So another kind of policy we're seeing, we have seen states issue procurement mandates, so mandating that their state procure X megawatts of X kind of resource, and put siting requirements on that. So it's not just procure any, gigawatt of renewable energy, but procure a gigawatt of renewable energy that is low impact. So that's another way we're seeing states kind of accelerate renewable energy deployment that has these 3C characteristics. Yes?
I wonder, and I'm curious if your model, if you're talking about it costing an additional 6%, but does that account for the cost it takes to restore power in climate-related weather events, or the cost of climate change that utilities are seeing now, and is there a way to factor that in?
So going back to power plays, I think. The modelers that do this have, they're bringing the kind of the cost assumptions around what it costs to develop a megawatt. I don't think they're taking into consideration a lot of kind of other externalities. I mean, they're not taking into consideration other environmental externalities either.
Can I make a really quick comment?
Yeah.
Glad you asked that question. Just a really quick note. So in 2023, more than 50% of all the new generating capacity added in the U.S. was solar. And why is that? Because it's the cheapest form of electricity. It's the cheapest form of electricity to bring online today. So, I mean, we would say you're going to save a ton of money with solar, and that's what our customers see, commercial, municipal, residential, and particularly if you add in environmental considerations, and if you add in the benefits to the grid of all this distributed energy, of shaving peaks, reducing some of the grid investments that our keynote speaker was talking about, which are billions of dollars, there are ways to reduce that with more distributed energy. So I think 6% is interesting because it doesn't seem like that much, but what we see is actually cost savings.
So I'm just going to go back to state policy for a sec. The other kind of big bucket of state policies that we are very big fans of, no surprise, is incentivizing renewable energy deployment on brownfields, on mine lands, on capped landfills. We have a whole program called Mining the Sun, as well as agrivoltaics, which I think is going to be, maybe not the solution, just as rooftop won't be the solution, but there's a lot of conflict with the agricultural community, and we need to have a food supply system. So agrivoltaics is, I think, emerging, and there's ways, and states are adopting incentives for agrivoltaics that seem to be making a difference. Renewable energy zoning, another policy that if renewable energy zones are identified with conservation values in mind and community values in mind, can be a 3C policy. And this isn't a policy, the last one, in the same category as, wouldn't require legislation, but a lot of states, and I didn't fact check in New Hampshire right quite yet, but mostly the state fish and wildlife agencies have adopted solar wind guidelines, not mandatory, not regulatory, but some guidelines about how to site projects and how to design projects in ways that minimize impacts on nature. It helps, I think, when there's a lot of disinformation sometimes out there, sometimes misinformation about the impacts of resources, to have the state's wildlife professionals say what a good project looks like. So I'm not sure if you have that in your state, but it is something that is widely available and a lot to draw from. So those are the kinds of state policies we think can really make a difference. Question is, do they make a difference? I'm not sure if folks are familiar with it. EPA has this program called Repowering America. It's very cool. It's all around encouraging the deployment of predominantly solar, but renewables on degraded lands. They've got tons of great research, and at the expense, at the risk of inciting New England rivalries, I'm going to show you this next map. This is from EPA, and they have looked at where there are projects on the ground on degraded lands, and I did not do this. They chose to do that little bump out of Massachusetts. You can see that just like a tremendous difference in Massachusetts compared to the surrounding states and compared to the rest of the country. If you actually look at just the cap landfills, it is really rare in Massachusetts to see a cap landfill that doesn't have solar on it, and that is due to state policy. So EPA has also looked at what kinds of policies are in place, and so they've coded this based on what the policies are. You have bigger than I do now. Wait, this one. So states that have financial incentives are in turquoise. States have green are states with streamlined permitting policies for brownfields. Orange is states that have both. So clearly it shows that state policy makes a difference. And with that, can take a few questions.
Yeah, time for questions. Go for it up front.
How are we combating the lobbying coming from oil and gas?
I think, okay, this is me kind of thinking personally. There's a lot of local opposition. There's a lot of money, there is money being put into kind of disinformation and falsehoods around renewable energy. I think local opposition, though, is genuine and homegrown. This is a big change in our landscape, and it's understandable, and I think we need to approach this with compassion. And as someone who lives in a rural area, yet local opposition really kind of grabs onto, or when there is genuine homegrown opposition, it can lock into some of this disinformation. Not well. I don't think anyone's doing it quite well. I think that organizations like the Nature Conservancy have a real role to play in not just kind of combating it, but also in acknowledging that there are real impacts. There are. It's true, and some of it is hyperbole. So we try and do that by bringing science to the table and kind of objective science. We have a 19-state, now it covers 19 states, but a kind of tool called Site Renewables Right, which shows from our perspective where we think there are areas that are higher and lower risk to wildlife and conservation values. And we will be expanding that nationwide to try and kind of, I think, take the wind out of the sails when people are throwing spaghetti at the wall, and some of that spaghetti is wildlife and conservation. Some of that may be true, some of it may not. So that's kind of how we try and address this, but it's not something that is very easy to address since it is so pervasive and in so many small places around the country.
I know we have more questions, and I promise we will get to them, but I'm going to invite Deb to get going, please. Oh, yes.
All right, can you hear me? I think I can drive off of this. So my name is Deb Perry. I am with the International City County Management Association, or ICMA. We're going to shift gears, I think, a little bit from what the previous speakers have been talking about. I'm going to talk to you about a program that we run called SolSmart. I have to put this disclaimer up because SolSmart is funded by the U.S. Department of Energy, and I have to clearly state that I do not work for the U.S. Department of Energy, and anything I say is my own personal views and not theirs. I cannot represent them. So with that, a little bit of housekeeping. What is SolSmart? So SolSmart is a free technical assistance program to help local governments. I said I work for the International City County Management Association. We are a professional association, as our name implies. Getting feedback. Let me see if I lean in.
I think you might go a little
Further. Okay, we'll try farther. So we're a professional association of those who are in leadership positions, management positions in local governments around the country and around the world. But what we also do, in addition to supporting our members, is generally support local governments on issues of concern to them. So we run programming on everything from public health, public safety, economic development. We actually do a lot of work on brownfields. That's a major issue under economic development. I run our energy programming. We've been supporting our local governments in energy work for more than a decade through programs like SolSmart. So we're able to provide free technical assistance to local governments that want to figure out these policies that they have control over. And I want to acknowledge, a lot of the discussion this morning has been about really important things that need to happen at the state level, at the utility level, and certainly all of those pieces of the puzzle are really important. But there are, as Jessica flagged, a number of things that local governments can be doing that are within their control. And that's things like permitting processes, zoning regulations, actually owning and supporting projects, hosting projects. All of that is kind of within the purview of the SolSmart program and things that we can help figure out. We're a big team. Again, we've been running this program for about 9 years now. We have a lot of different organizations that work with us. That's things like the World Resources Institute, the National Renewable Energy Lab on the team. We also have some of our association partners, like the National Association of Counties, the National Association of Regional Councils, as well as folks in the solar industry and in the private sector consulting, groups like the Cadmus Group that specialize in clean energy. So again, our focus is on what local governments can do, and we really try to help local governments to remove barriers, again, through our free technical assistance and training, and ultimately do their part as much as possible to bring down the costs of solar. 65% of the cost of solar, this is a national statistic, is what we call soft costs. So hardware costs have come down tremendously in the past decade or two. But those soft costs, the costs of actually getting the project done, whether that's financing, permitting, any delays, interconnection, all of those soft costs, that's about 65% of a project, and those haven't come down nearly as much as the hardware costs. So those are kind of stickier, and that's where we really have to work at improving our processes, improving our regulations, our local ordinances, getting folks trained up so they know how to do permitting and inspection. All of those are pieces to driving down the soft costs. So examples of our technical assistance, these are just some big buckets. The reality is I'm very lucky to run a program that can offer a ton of flexibility and really help local governments do what's important to them. So when anyone joins SolSmart, the first question is, what are your goals? What's your community trying to do? What are you struggling with? And then we really can design technical assistance to meet those needs. So it can be anything from, again, a deep dive into working in zoning regulations. Every community that comes through, if they have zoning in place, gets a zoning review and some recommendations from the team about where they can be improving those processes. It can be trainings, again, for staff that do things like building permits, and we cover building code, we go through inspections, what are the best practices there. We can help on procurement. We sometimes help develop procurement documents or review proposals that come in. Recently, we helped a small community who got a bunch of proposals in response to an RFP, but they weren't really apples to apples, and they were struggling with how to actually compare these different bids. And so we were able to help them kind of put that together, look at an apples to apples comparison, and make a good choice. Feasibility assessments is another area that we can often help. We have communities that say, this is the property we own. Is there any potential here? Can we do anything here? And so we're able to do, not engineering studies, like I don't have that kind of budget, but we're at least able to do some feasibility assessments and give communities a sense of where they have opportunities and maybe which projects are more viable than others. We've been around for 9 years, so we have a lot of templates and a lot of examples that we can draw from. This is just a sample of things that we have on our website. So models, examples of policies, examples of practices, lots of pre-recorded trainings. And again, we really focus on customizing that support. So these are our program guides. We have an advisory group that helps us think through what are the best practices that we're recommending, and those are written down in the program guide. But again, the technical assistance and support that we're able to offer can really be adapted to what the community wants to work on. I don't know if I actually said this, but at the end of the day, SolSmart is actually a designation program. So communities that engage with us, they work through these practices, they again, improve their zoning, improve their permitting. Maybe they want to work on a solarized campaign or just public education campaign, whatever they want to work on, and they're acquiring points for these different things. So the program guide lays that out, and at the end of the day, you're earning a plaque on the wall. So if you've ever seen like Tree City USA, you can earn a SolSmart plaque on the wall, often kind of hanging in town hall, something like that. We've had 534 communities go through that designation process. We've helped many others, so ideally folks go through all the way through the program, but we often have folks come in and out of our trainings and other things. And we have 4 different levels. So basically, the more that you do, the higher levels of designation you can receive. So we go from bronze to silver to gold, and we just last year introduced a platinum level, and we have 4 communities that are platinum designated for the work that they've done. To get platinum, they have to produce an instant permit for a solar project. Literally, it is instant. They have to partner with community-based organizations to really be working on equitable access to solar, and they have to be tracking their metrics and in addition to other things that they work on.
Can I interrupt for a question?
Absolutely.
So
I'm very intrigued about this platinum. Is the order of operations really what you said, which is instant permit first, then community, or is it really the reverse? Could you address that?
No, sorry, those are just discrete credits. Most communities don't go right to instant permitting, but that is like a platinum level thing that you have to achieve. So most communities at the bronze level, you're honestly really working on just transparency. So when a solar developer wants a permit, it helps them a lot to know what your process is. How long is it going to take? What are you going to ask of them? And we don't usually even ask you to do a lot of improvements. It's really just creating that transparency of really clearly laying out your process, putting it in a public location. We can help you improve your paperwork and things, but bronze level is a lot about just creating that transparency and being really clear about what you're going to require. As you move up through the levels, we start to look for that kind of performance-based metric, if you will. So I think gold, you need to be giving permits in 3 days, and platinum, you need to be giving permits instantaneously. So kind of ratchet up as you move through the levels.
So I would love to talk to you later.
Yeah, happy to.
Official, but do you have any training for local inspectors? Because as an individual who will design a federal solar system, what you find is they're not informed, educated enough on some of the software that comes with the hardware that meets the regulations of rapid shutdown, and they will force with them with the fire department additional mechanical stuff, which is time and cost and hassle for the solar owner, whether it's personal or business.
Yeah, so absolutely. We run trainings for building inspectors on a pretty regular basis. We sometimes partner to do that. We've partnered with regional organizations and created customized. We also offer national trainings. So absolutely. So I just put this slide. We have a website, solsmart.org. You can click there to get started if you're interested, but I'll be here all day. And then the other thing I wanted to mention, and this is very new news, SolSmart is now part of a family of programs funded by the Department of Energy under a brand we're calling Energy Ready. So we now have similar designation programs for electric vehicle charging infrastructure and for distributed wind. Distributed wind is distinct from large wind farms. So distributed wind really is kind of that smaller scale serving a load on site. Those new programs are just kind of getting started and stood up, but we're really excited to be able to work with communities on different technologies and also to be able to kind of integrate that technical assistance across technologies. So Energy Ready is very exciting, and we're hoping to work with a lot of communities to do all of this work. Time for a question? Yes, go ahead.
Going back to the Nation Conservancy, this is kind of drilling down, but she mentioned Massachusetts and landfills, and I can think of one where I know there's a lot of knotweed in the same area where they can do solar. I mean, they're managing invasives when siting solar. Is it something that there's help with?
Yeah.
I mean, that just seems like if you're going to put solar in, you want to make sure it's not going to get overrun by
Yeah.
something else.
Just a general comment first. A lot of folks think that solar development and renewable development is, special and different than development. And it is. It has some unique attributes, but managing invasive species in a construction project is common to all construction. And the reason I mention that is because we know how to do it. It's pretty easily solved in a well managed project. Jessica, did you want to comment?
I actually think it's more of a developer question.
I'm happy to speak to that. So your typical community solar project, maybe 15 to 20 acres. After you finish putting the panels and the racking in, you will reseed the site, and at least for our company, we own and operate our projects. A good number of developers sell projects before construction. We don't. We develop them and then own them over their useful life. And our typical operating standard is to plant with a native mix.
Sam, do you want to just continue, please? Do your
Sure,
presentation?
I'm happy to. Let me start with just a little bit about who Kearsarge is, and then I thought it might be helpful to walk folks through what the typical development cycle looks like for a private community solar project in New Hampshire, and where we're seeing real challenges getting projects through development on the siting and permitting side. There are also real challenges on the interconnection side, but that's not what we're here today to talk about. So Kearsarge, we develop and own and operate solar projects, primarily community solar projects. So as Mark was saying, that's 1 to 5 megawatts in size. That translates to about 5 to 20 acres if you're looking at a ground mount project. We have over 300 megawatts of projects in long-term operation, and those projects are primarily in the Northeast across New England. We have a major focus on New Hampshire. We own the project on the Manchester landfill here in the city. We're building the City of Concord's landfill project. We have landfill projects with a bunch of other municipalities across the state, and a good number of projects with private landowners. All in all, our pipeline in New Hampshire is, probably about 150 megawatts. So that's 20, 30 projects. Your typical private site in New Hampshire, at least for us, Mark can comment on this as well, it's going to be a forested site. It's going to be a little hilly. And it probably will have been logged. Our experience with landowners is that the landowners who are most interested in solar projects are those who are looking to get some cash flow from their property. And if they're interested in that, chances are they've been logging their land. So we're not talking about old growth forest here. We are talking about forest, but it's typically been a working forest. the first step in the development process is interconnection. There's a whole lot of risk there. A lot of projects fail at interconnection. But if you get through interconnection, that's when the siting and permitting challenges start. Certainly in New Hampshire, there are challenges on both the municipal level and the state level. I would say things are working better on the municipal level at the moment than they are at the state level. There's no one-stop permitting shop. That would be great to have. We don't have it. Oftentimes, there's not even a solar ordinance on the books. And if that's the case, then you're going to need a variance from the local community. And even though the variance is supposed to be a legal process where if you meet legal standards, the variance issues, in practice, it turns into a political referendum on your project. More often than not, though, we feel like if we are citing the project appropriately and making sure we address community concerns, that we can navigate those municipal challenges. The most acute challenge we're dealing with at the moment is on the state level with the state's stormwater rules. So these are the rules that govern the stormwater impact that your project may have and how to mitigate that. This has been I think, a complicated subject for states as solar projects become more common, because solar projects represent a new sort of stormwater problem. The panels themselves are impervious, but once rainwater flows off or drips off the panels, it's dripping onto pervious ground. Some states have come up with approaches that really work well for managing stormwater, ensure that appropriate controls are put in place, ensure we're following best practices, following the science which is beginning to emerge on solar and stormwater. New Hampshire's not quite there yet. The rules are quite prescriptive at the moment. And so you end up in a place where for your typical 20-acre project, to manage stormwater, the rules probably require you to put in place anywhere from 4 to 5 acres of concrete stormwater basins. From a financial perspective, that's a huge added cost. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. And to go back to the point that Mark made at the very beginning of his talk, New Hampshire community solar projects don't have a whole lot of financial wiggle room because the revenue you receive for these projects is about 1/3 to 50% of what you might receive in a neighboring state. In terms of cents, we're talking like 8-9 cents in New Hampshire, where if you were in a place like Massachusetts, you'd be above 20 cents. So these projects don't have the flexibility to cover those types of construction costs. So that's an immediate challenge for us right now. I think the good news here is that faced with this problem, we've done a real deep dive into the scientific literature on solar and stormwater management. And there's a growing body of academic research that seems to be showing that the worst fears that folks have had about the runoff that solar projects might produce hasn't come to fruition, and that you can appropriately deal with the stormwater impacts of solar projects. They do have some, not with massive concrete basins, but with lower impact interventions, ensuring that reseeding takes place as soon as possible after construction. There are French drain equivalent solutions that you can put in place. And neighboring states like New York, Massachusetts, Maine are doing a really good job making sure these stormwater solutions are available to projects. So that's certainly an immediate area where we're hoping that New Hampshire can follow the lead of its neighboring states.
Sam, can I just add about the one-stop shopping in New Hampshire? So just so everybody is aware, you know, the reason why Sam is saying there's no one-stop shopping in New Hampshire is because we do have a siting agency called the Site Evaluation Committee, but they have no jurisdiction to do siting for projects that are under 5 megawatts. And right now, because as was discussed earlier, we have a 5 megawatt cap on community scale solar at only municipalities and schools. It really is as if there is no one-stop shop option for under 5 megawatt projects. The Site Evaluation Committee, when you hit that 5 megawatts up to 30 megawatts, they have what's called discretionary jurisdiction. So if the developer or anyone else petitions the Site Evaluation Committee, they might say yes, they might say no to handling the siting. And then 30 megawatts or more, which really is not very financially attractive in New Hampshire right now, that must go to the Site Evaluation Committee. So if you're not at the Site Evaluation Committee, you're at a local planning board or at a local zoning board, and if your project happens to span 2 cities or towns, you're at both of those towns. It's difficult.
I might just quickly add to that when it comes to permitting, there's always trade-offs. So we have a couple 20 megawatt projects in development. We could try to go through the Site Evaluation Committee. We're not. We're gonna keep them going through local permitting because they're appropriately cited projects. We have a good relationship with the municipality. When you go through the Site Evaluation Committee, and this is often the same in other states, going through state permitting, even though it's a one-stop shop, it's more expensive and it can take longer.
Okay. Questions? Yes, Nick.
Yeah, this one is mainly for Jessica, but I guess what recommendations do you have for ensuring that environmental justice communities are able to provide meaningful input into site renewables and the impacts these communities are minimized to the greatest extent possible?
I think 2 things. One is procedural, and one is distributional. The process of engaging communities, engaging them early, and making sure that the least powerful voices in the room are elevated is incredibly important. I don't think that there are really great guidelines in the renewable energy space specifically, but the environmental justice community has a long history of developing guidelines on how to engage disadvantaged communities that rather than reinventing the wheel, I think the renewable energy industry should kind of take a look at. So that's the first part, is how you do it and when you do it and whose voice you elevate. And the second piece is through community benefit agreements. So a lot of developers do enter into community benefit agreements with communities, and that can mean really anyone. It could be the municipality, it could be, you know, a local school district or something like that, to share the benefits, the economic benefits of a project with the municipality or local groups. Again, not a science on how to do it, but there is a pretty big emerging literature on community benefit agreements with lots of great examples. Department of Energy has some good resources. And at least with solar, the Nature Conservancy is working on a big solar effort, Solar Uncommon Dialogue with SEIA, the Solar Energy Industry Association. And some of the things that we are doing are developing best practices and guidelines for community engagement and benefit sharing, because it, you know, that's the third C, is communities and getting that right. And I think we still have a lot to learn about what that looks like.
I saw another hand. Yes, go ahead.
So back to my
Yep.
for a commercial, to what extent would the whole solar energy movement benefit if commercial enterprise were more engaged? Would they, for example, convince the PUC to be more generous in reimbursement? So this is sort of a political conversation too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. I will say, I mean, even though I was sharing, some of the challenges for businesses to take on solar, we're really bullish on the commercial opportunity in New Hampshire because businesses are saving money with solar. We hear that, we see that in the projects that we've done with them, and we work a lot with business leaders, manufacturing businesses, and others who are at the legislature, with us, to talk about how investing in solar has enabled their businesses to stay in New Hampshire, grow, invest. So I would say, right now we have a growing number of business leaders in this state who get it, who have seen it personally impact their bottom line, and who are showing up and trying to inform our legislature. And the improvement in net metering and other solar policy actually has quite a lot of bipartisan support in New Hampshire. There have been a number of bills that have been passed in the last few years. Many of them have been vetoed. We're going to have a new governor, and so I think we see a lot of opportunity in the coming session, and business leaders will absolutely be part of making the case, as they have been.
Mm-hmm. Yes, go ahead.
So in the spirit of renewable energy being kind of benefit, environmental benefit to all of us, and is there an opportunity for New Hampshire projects to participate in other states for higher benefit? And then are there benefits to New Hampshire, ratepayers or residents to that kind of broader regional wheeling of power of renewable energy? So siting it in the right location and then finding customers that will pay top dollar for it. How does that work? How does it work?
Yeah, understood the question. Thanks for the question. I think it's a good one. There are those sort of regional dynamics at play for larger projects. So our 20 megawatt projects, for example, the energy from those projects will sell into the ISO New England wholesale market, which is a regional market that encompasses all of New England. Most solar projects, don't just participate in the wholesale markets and receive wholesale revenues. They have an off-taker associated with them that signs a power purchase agreement with you. And depending on the flavor of power purchase agreement that you're utilizing, that off-taker can either be in New England or it can actually be anywhere in the country. So there are regional dynamics at play there. For these smaller community solar projects, 1 to 5 megawatts, the programs are all state by state. So there's some regional crossover. For example, New Hampshire projects, the renewable energy credits that you generate from those projects, you typically sell those into the Massachusetts market because that's where you get the most value for them. But beyond the interplay with RECs, there's not really much of a regional dynamic at play with these smaller projects.
Let's see if we have, do we have a question over here? Yeah, go ahead.
So, if New Hampshire gets its act together and improves its solar incentives, are the commercial projects, is there a hidden upside there that you guys don't advertise when you look at the ROIs on the project, that if the legislature did change, the projects would be way more profitable for an industrial site?
Would it be more profitable for the commercial entity, or would it be more profitable for the solar developer?
For the commercial entity.
Yes. I mean, the short answer is yes, right? So we're a construction company, so we make money by developing and building projects. At the end of the day, it's the customer who owns the array who's going to see that benefit from improved net metering values over time. So, we try to model at revision pretty conservatively because we want our customers to be happy. And so we try to model those energy savings conservatively over time. If we see improvements in net metering policy and net metering rates, that customer will benefit because they will have essentially a larger return on investment because they'll be compensated at a more appropriate level for the energy that their system is producing.
So would you hazard a guess at how big that extra potential might be? Because that's the nature of investment. You never know what the upside is.
Yeah.
Sam,
Well,
you mentioned you're getting twice as much money in other markets.
Right.
Is that related?
Yeah, I mean, I can answer on a per kilowatt hour basis. So right now in New Hampshire, if let's say you have a 150 kW system, you put it on the roof of your business, you're going to get about 8-9 cents for that power that you sell back to the utility. In Massachusetts, you'd be more like 20.
So you're being super conservative. If the rules were to change in New Hampshire.
It's just what the rules are. I'm not sure it's a question of conservatism or not. It's just that's what you get.
Yes.
This might be a basic question, but renewable energy zoning was brought up a few times, and just from like a local government perspective, what does that look like in practice in terms of like what sites are good candidates for renewable energy zoning, or what kind of like laws you put in terms of what the definitions of the zone are, that kind of thing?
Sure, so I can take that one, Jessica, if you have more to add. I think it was on your slide, but somebody mentioned, I think it was Sam, that you end up in a discretionary review, and then maybe that's just you end up in a lot of public hearings and hearing what the community thinks and all of that. So as much as we can, we advise communities to have clear processes and to get away from discretionary reviews and conditional use permits as much as possible. And we recognize absolutely there are some districts that are complicated and maybe because of their density or something else, and you're going to have some discretionary reviews or conditional use permits in those areas. But to the extent you can look at your community and see where is solar appropriate at a certain size and scale, and then either have it be an actual permitted use or set very clear guidance about what is acceptable to your community, and then clearly have that designated within your zoning regulations. That is the gold standard. So that's something that we work through. It's different in every community. You do have to look at where you have infrastructure, so we don't want to make a solar zone where there's no possibility of interconnection. So it starts with understanding all of those parameters and really thinking about where is solar possible in the community, where is it acceptable to the community, and then I want to say layering in those other benefits or considerations that you need as a community. So we find a lot of communities are silent on whether there have to be plantings, whether you have to use certain species if when you reseed, whether you're going to manage for invasives. You should not be silent on those things. So really thinking about what are those issues and making sure that they're all clearly laid out. And again, so that when a developer comes and they're presenting their project to you, these are the questions we are going to ask you. We're going to ask them every time. These are the reviews that we do. These are the things that we care about. And then to have a consistency of process kind of every time.
All right. It's lunchtime, everybody. Thank the panel, please.